Hi everyone, this is Stefan here from the SASA newsletter, and this is our second insert for the Statistics Legends range that we are doing for a YouTube video range that we're doing for the community. And today we have Professor Johan Ferreira from WITS. He is probably very well known in the SASA community. He's all-round in terms of teaching. He has that holy grail of some education papers, really an all-rounder, and we're so happy. And Johan, thank you for joining us today and for chatting a bit and to see what's on your mind.
Thank you, Stefan. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our conversation.
So I usually start with this question because it's very interesting to know how each person got to where they are. So how did you end up in statistics? Was it deliberate? Was it by accident? And then also in academia, how did it happen for you?
I fell into it, really. It's one of those aspects where I think the discipline chose me more than I chose it. After I finished high school, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't really enjoy science, so engineering or something of the likes was not really for me. I thought that blood would probably make me pass out, so anything within a medical related field would probably also not be for me. And through a process of elimination, I settled on trying out actuarial science, not really knowing what it is about, but I thought math doesn't scare me that much, so I can probably try and do something with that. And after I finished my undergraduate degree, I thought, this actuarial science thing reminds me a bit of a lemon meringue. You know, one of those big lemon meringues you see in some bakeries, or like at a place like Mug and Bean. It looks delicious, it looks great, and you get a slice and it's like this high, and you think, yeah, I'm sure I can finish this. And then you have about 5, 6, 7 bites left, and you're like, I'm pretty sure I could finish this, but I'm not going to have a good time. And at the end of my third year of BEc Actuarial Science, I felt the same. I thought, I can probably still become an actuary. I'm not sure whether I want to. I'm not sure whether I'll really enjoy this. And at that point, I really enjoyed a lot of the statistics or mathematical statistics courses that I've been doing. And I thought, I'm going to opt for an honors in stats, just because I think that seems like something that resonates with me a little bit better. And then after that, I started my master's degree. Sometime during my master's degree, I was asked by the HOD, or like 1 or 2 or 3 of us in the master's class, there were some retirements in the department at that time, and asked me if I'm willing to maybe take as a sessional lecturer 1 or 2 undergraduate courses to do. And I said, well, yeah, sure, I think I can do that. And then I finished my master's degree. And since I was kind of in the whole idea of studying, I continued with my PhD when I finished my master's. I found something that I think I resonated well with. It was quite a theoretical journey for me, at least in my postgraduate study years. And it's something that I really enjoy doing because I think I'm a pretty stubborn person. And the convenience of doing somewhat theoretical work for me is due to the fact that I don't like having too many gray areas in my life, or at the very least in my professional life. So when I'm looking at some theoretical focus that I've had over the last 10 years, it comes from a stubborn place, I think, because the proof is right or it's not, and I like it to be right. Niche-wise, what I've been doing over the last few years, I think it's heavily influenced, as most of us, were heavily influenced by the mentors and supervision teams that we've been exposed to. But more now, I start reappreciating again what a sense of intuition means, which is, I think, essential to anybody working in academia or wanting to be a researcher. This idea that something must make intuitive sense before, even though the computational aspects might be daunting, or you struggle with convergence, or the theoretical aspects might be daunting or terrifying number of maths or amount of maths that you have to write down. But the intuition, I think, is the most important part. And when I think back, I can kind of gain a sense of how I've tried to build that over the last 10 years, even though I wasn't doing it at the time very consciously. Yeah.
I've never anyone made the similarity that actual science is. I love that meringue analogy. I think I'm going to use it
To be honest,
in class to convince students to switch, because I think a lot of students, like you said, they kind of maybe know more about actual science compared to stats, but they stick with the actual science because that's where the money is, that's where the opportunities are, and they're not really that sure how the stats thing will play out. But it's building that intuition. So thank you for that.
I actually, over the last 10 years, I've often told, when I'm teaching a third year class specifically, and I tell them, okay, you have to make a decision about what you want to do next year. And then I tell them, many of you might still want to become actuaries, and that there's absolutely no problem with that. And I will never begrudge that towards you. The only thing I'm really asking is that you take a moment to think about an awareness that there are other options as well, because actuarial science is not a one-size-fits-all. Data science isn't a one-size-fits-all. Stats isn't. Nothing is. But the amount of time and energy that you're thinking about, I want to become an actuary. I want you to take the same amount of time and energy and think, do I want to become a statistician? Do I want to become a data scientist? Do I want to become an academic? And I often tell them of that lemon meringue analogy in class, mostly because I think that there are some students that will really resonate with that because I resonated with that. And then secondly, the students who that does not resonate with, that would not do them damage in the long run of thinking that they might make an error in choosing something that they want to do. So yeah, I've used it often and to great success in order to, I want to use the word recruit, but recruit is a very harsh verb for something that sounds like we're poaching students, which is not the case.
Yeah, it's more directing the students where they need to go. And also to be honest about our field. I mean, a lot of times, even for example, at Open Day, I help at our department's Open Day. I mean, you need to be honest about your field. You need to be able to tell someone who might be very excited about data science because it is the buzzword right now, and you'd be honest, like, okay, but I think you have a skewed view of what this entails, and maybe this is not for you. That is your view, but yeah, just to direct people where they need to go and to be honest about.
What I've also said to some students in the past is, of course, you can still become an actuary after doing an honors or a master's in statistics. It might take you 2, 3, 4 years longer, but then you'll be a much more well-rounded actuary than anybody who simply goes on and straight qualifies. Because in my experience, once you qualify as an actuary, you are highly unlikely to become a statistician after that. But you can become a statistician and then still qualify as an actuary.
That is so, so true. And it's, I think, a lot also to do with the coding skills needed for the statisticians. Whereas, like you see, you can really go from the one to the other, but the opposite is not.
It's really not true. Impossible, but it's way more improbable to go back from it to be an actuary and then become a statistician than the other way around.
I mean, okay, so you got into, but it's also I like how you said that you've built this intuition, because for me that is why I love stats. I mean, if you're approached by someone with a problem, I get so excited about, what potentially will work, how to make sure that the data actually addresses the research question. So even if you don't go into stats, I think it's a very nice skill to learn about what will you do, what the thing that you do, will it actually address the question? So it really teaches you hard on problem solving skills. No matter what the field.
I agree.
I am going to share this video with my students afterwards. They need to hear this, not just from me, but from other people.
Excellent.
Okay, Johan, so your research career is pretty impressive. You are obviously very productive. How do you, I mean, we know how busy academics are with the amount of teaching that we have to do in South Africa. There are massive classes, supervision. Now we also have to do community engagement. Is there something that you think you are doing right that maybe other people are doing wrong? Or is it just spending hours and hours and hours? Or what is your process?
When I think back over the last 10 years, I do think I've been fortunate that I have been very productive by many measuring sticks. By some measuring sticks, I would not have been as productive. So it depends on who you ask. But
but research, I mean, you're very productive research-wise, right? Definitely the list is there for someone at your age. I'm not going to say what happened before this interview. But the research is there. I mean, the community engagement is there to an extent for what is to expect at someone at prof level. And I mean, the teaching influence is also there because you've been recognized in media for your teaching style. So I just want to put that on the record for everyone to hear before you now continue with your answer.
Thank you, Stefan. I think, firstly, I need to say, obviously, this has not been all due to only me. I have been very privileged to have collaborative networks that jointly made my life very productive. And hopefully, in a sense, I've made theirs productive as well. It's not a one human show. It's not a one human journey. And that is something that I've come more familiar with over the last 3, 4, 5 years. It's easy for somebody who has had a long and illustrious career to tell younger individuals or younger members of academia, no, you just need a good team. You just need a good team, and then you'll be sorted. It's one thing to say that and to hear that, and it's completely another thing to experience that and to be able to sit back and appreciate the environment that you've worked in and that you could have participated in. So I would never dream of mentioning anything that I think anybody else is doing wrong. That is neither my place nor the time for me to ever say something like that. But
not wrong, but maybe
I know different from me, maybe. But the most important thing I think is this idea of sustained collaboration is an easy word to say. Multidisciplinary collaboration is an easy word to say. It's not so easy to get that into practice that much. And there is a significant amount of time and energy that one has to spend in thinking about how that could work. Not necessarily spending time writing a paper and putting someone else's name on, or, you know, just doing the lip service of it. But the true struggle is finding a niche group of people, not necessarily one group, having collaborators. I have a collaborator in Australia, I have some collaborators in Italy, I have a collaborator in Portugal, but those did not just fall from the sky. And in many cases, I can mention 1 or 2 or 3 cases where I've tried to reach out to other collaborators who had similar interests than me, where nothing came to fruition of that. And it's about the tenacity and simply not just giving up and finding a space for yourself and for your thoughts with other people. And then as soon as that kind of group is formed and you have access to individuals who share your views, or at least share your train of thought, not necessarily your views, then it becomes a much easier process towards building a research portfolio and continuously updating or honing your research interests in a meaningful way. And then the other thing I also want to say, there's this drive from our employers, at least in this country, and from our funding agencies in this country or wherever else we apply for funding, that says multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary is essential. You can't get funding without it. You can't get promoted without it. You can't that. And I think that is a bit of a challenging and somewhat short-sighted ultimatum that is being put towards many people working in academia, not necessarily only statistics, because it's important that these type of projects only work if they are like-minded or humans that are compatible in a professional sense that can make that work, and that takes time. In my case, maybe I've been very fortunate because I've had wonderful mentors over the year who helped expose me to some of these collaborative networks that I'm now a part of. So the most important thing is finding a team. And the last thing that I'm just going to say as part of that, in the same breath, for anybody who wishes to do a master's or a PhD, I personally think that we are often, as aspiring postgraduate students, think, oh, maybe I should go and do my PhD at Oxford. Maybe I should go do my PhD at MIT. Maybe I should go do my PhD at this or that very fancy university. And I'm not discouraging anybody from having aspirations like that. The most important thing that I actually just always tell individuals who have such conversations with me is that the logo on your degree certificate will not be the one who's helping you learn something. It's more important that you find a supervisor or supervision team wherever they are. They can be at WITS, they can be at Stellenbosch, they can be at Fort Hare, they can be at Venda, they can be at UP, they can be at UCT, they can be at MIT or Oxford or wherever else. But finding an individual that you can work with and that can help you learn and experience as much as you can is, in the long run, much more valuable to your own growth as a researcher. Let me rather say as a thinker, or eventually by the time you do a PhD, as technically a philosopher, than the institution necessarily will. And that is the first step into thinking how you position yourself in terms of a team, of where you can thrive, knowing that there are obstacles that do come across in the way every now and then, and facing that type of adversity in spite of the adversity.
Definitely. I mean, very good comprehensive answer. I think you touched two things. I quickly want to reiterate. So one, whenever you ask someone who, let's say, classify them as, academically successful, they always say it's the engagement. It's being part of a team. It's mentoring. I mean, it must be there. I think I would be very surprised if someone can climb the steps or climb the ladder of academia without that. That must be a super person. And then the multidisciplinary thing is for me is also quite interesting because, like you said, it takes time. I mean, I've also a lot of failed attempts at multidisciplinary research, maybe from the point of where I engage and it doesn't lead maybe to that output of an article. I have loads of those. But this multidisciplinarity really comes with time, and you have to, like the word you used there is tenacity. Definitely, you need to play the game, unfortunately, a little bit.
That's true.
And then, but I don't like, and I totally agree with you on this agenda that's pushed down upon us, not just multidisciplinary, but also research for impact. I absolutely loathe that term, because what is impact? For me, sometimes the idea that I get, what I think management or whoever gives funding, impact for them means media coverage, visibility, and I think that's also a very limiting view in terms of research. So yeah, maybe a bit controversial to talk about. We don't want to upset the funders.
I think,
but it's important for them to realize, I mean, if they don't know the field well, and it's very likely that a lot of people don't know our fields that well, right? Because it's complicated, it's So they might have a very odd or incorrect view of what impact should mean or should mean.
Yeah, I always try to remind myself when I'm writing a grant application or when I'm reviewing a postgraduate thesis or dissertation or something of the like, I have to remind myself that impact is temporary. Most research, impact is temporary. Also, impact is evolving, but fundamental research, or let me rather just say research, does not change. I mean that in a holistic, almost in a qualitative sense, because what's impactful now might not still be impactful in 5 years' time. Yet,
you mean
I
by
am
the
still...
Sorry, by that impact, you mean like the management view of impact?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
But yet here I am writing a paper, or when I'm doing a project, I'm still citing work from 1983 for argument's sake. And that was just research. If we have to compare it verbally, in verbal terms to what research now means versus research then. So research, the idea, the philosophy of research is not that different, yet whatever impact means changes much faster than what research means. And I am not an impactionist, I'm a researcher first and foremost. And so most of the academics, or at least, let's say in a utopian world, if an academic has a PhD degree, I always like to think I am a statistician second. I'm secondly a statistician in academia. I'm first of all a philosopher. I actually have the degree for that. I don't have a doctorate in statistics. I have a doctorate of philosophy, as many people in the academic context would have, which means that I have to be a thinker first before I'm a statistician. And that is both scary and liberating at the same time. And so the idea of impact is a very valuable additional consideration for when we do need to motivate why we are interested in what we are interested in. But prior to that, academia is supposed to be filled with the thinkers and the philosophers of specifically within our disciplines. So impact is a revolving door of whatever that meaning is, I think, in way less so than what research means. So when we talk about research for impact, I feel like that the two actually don't really speak that well to each other, and we should take great care in using that off the top of our heads and without a clear and succinct idea of what exactly that's supposed to mean.
I mean, it could be a bit of a trade-off, finding, because obviously you need the funding, but also you want to stay true to the research.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I was just reminded, I remember for my PhD defense, I had an incredible supervisor. I'm so fond of him and how he mentored me. But anyway, let's say a month or so before my PhD defense, he gave me a book, basically philosophy, or what is knowledge.
Yeah.
And he's like, because at the PhD things, they might ask you questions like, are you more of, what is your view of what is knowledge and all of that? And I had absolutely no clue. I've never had philosophy. I mean, I don't even know the philosophers that well. And it was a bit of a mind shift, like you said, like what does it mean to be a researcher? Why do I actually, I mean, we're getting quite abstract right now, but these are important things to think about. Like even when you have to write that darn teaching philosophy stuff, your teaching portfolio. I mean, it's a lot of jargon, but there's a lot of value to it because it makes you really think about what are we doing here and how I would go about my classes in any case. So I definitely agree with you. It is a difficult position, well, game to be in, if we can call it a game, or rat race.
In the statistical sense, of course, before this gets too abstract, of course, two major schools of philosophy is the idea of probabilities are long-run outcomes over time, or over repeated experiments expressed as a percentage, which is frequentist.
Yeah.
versus a Bayesian approach, which incorporates prior belief in one way or another. These are two major philosophical schools about how probability fundamentally works.
Which is foundation to science, and you're obviously the latter, right?
I would not give myself out as a Bayesian. No.
Oh no, interesting.
No. I have a vague interest in Bayesian work, but I would not consider myself. I think that, no, let me rather say, I think there are other individuals in this country who are much stronger Bayesians than I would be.
I mean, I'm also definitely not a Bayesian, but do you have an inkling towards a side in terms of what is a better view in terms of, like you explained, of the probability in science? And
oh no, I think there are a lot of pros and cons to both, of course, but in the Bayesian sense, often I think personally, I think the Bayesian aspects make sense only if you really know what priors to use or what belief to put into and how you want to model a prior probabilistically. Other than that, it will only be driven by the data, meaning it will only mostly be driven by the likelihood in any case. So I suppose I would say I have 7 toes in the frequentist pool, and I have 3 toes in the Bayesian pool. I have an appreciation for both. I'll probably lean towards being a generic frequentist in general.
I'm a bit the same. I usually tell people or my students when they ask me, I'll tell them I'm not smart enough to be a Bayesian.
Yeah, that's a good reflection.
Because it is very abstract to think about it, and we don't. I mean, we were all brought up frequentists in undergrad.
Yeah,
and so it comes very natural to most of us. But I have much respect for the Bayesians.
I would sometimes, I think, there's a very meaningful reflection about being a Bayesian, because there's, in a world in our discipline that we are heavily geared towards quantitative thought. But in a Bayesian sense, those 3 toes of mine that's in the Bayesian pool would be that, but how to determine optimal priors, how to motivate that, how to think about what a good prior choice means is actually rather qualitative sometimes, at least in the philosophical sense. And so there's a qualitative aspect, emotional aspect to how one, I think, could motivate Bayesian work. And that is not something that I think that every statistician or every human by design can do. There's safety in numbers, and I think that's why I also would rather say I'm quantitatively inclined as infrequentist. So that's just something I wanted to mention.
Okay, I'm gonna change our direction a little bit. Do you enjoy teaching?
I do enjoy teaching. I mentioned to you prior to the interview, I was exposed to a lot of public speaking when I was in high school. I thank my parents for that. And so teaching for me, I try to make it as conversational as possible. Mm. I have another colleague at work who says he...
Sorry, so I'm going to... so your teaching style, so you say you're very conversational. So your classes, are they lectures? Are they... What do you do? Or like, what is your...
There are 2 things that immediately come to mind about when I teach. This is predominantly motivated around an undergraduate class. I think it makes more sense to me that I try to reiterate and try to drive home a point of intuition. Because so much of what we teach, there are some aspects or some topics on the periphery of an undergraduate curriculum that is maybe not that intuitive, but a lot of it is. A lot of it should be.
Yeah.
I think this idea of intuition is a major component of also breaking down a stigma of fear, especially when it comes to many of the stats courses. And then the other thing that immediately comes to mind is reflective. Because there is so much intuition. So at the end of the day, thinking like, a lot of this we actually already knew. A lot of this type of stuff, or this type of calculation, or this type of theory is something that we all inherently do as humans. There's a lot of what we do in stats that we are really just formalizing what we as humans do. If we think about what a probability is just from the get-go, I mean, we all calculate probabilities every single moment of our lives. Like, I have to think, okay, I have to be at work at 2 p.m. What are the chances that I'll be in time if I leave home by 1 p.m.? But that implies an immediate sense of a probabilistic structure. It implies that I have some prior information, or at least some data. This is rather abstract, but the idea of probabilistic thought is very human.
Yeah, it's like it's like the expected value. I ask students, so in some of the first classes in probability, I ask them, if you walk into the student lounge center, what do you think that the typical person will buy, or what do you think is the typical age? I mean, your mind immediately goes to the average. You think, what is the most typical thing that I would think? And that's kind of where I begin the expected value of a random variable. That's how we think. So you say you have this intuition, or I mean the way you teach, but do you get a bit of backlash from the students because they come from, let's just be honest, they come from a bit of a broken school system where they are just taught stuff and never really, well, most, I don't want to completely generalize, but there's this, basically they just want the list of stuff that they want to do, to learn, get the marks, move on. So as soon as a lecture, and this is my experience because it's something that I tried, but I'm not sure if I'm succeeding, but as soon as I start to do this thing where I like, okay, let's think about this, let's reflect, they don't want to, ever. Or very few students engage with that kind of lecturing. Like, do you experience that? And if so, do you engage? How do you approach that?
I have experienced that. I've not had too many students speak up. I've had a recent lecturer evaluation where one student wrote, like, he keeps on talking about intuition. I don't know what that means. And that really took me by surprise. I think the most important thing for me at this stage is to keep in mind that, there are we all have a different idea of intuition. Like, you might have, I'm different from mine. And then if I have 200 second-year math stats students in front of me, their idea of intuition is also different from mine. I often think these younger generations, I read somewhere recently where they described them as screenagers instead of teenagers. And then I think, you know what, actually, I'm a screenager as well, because I'm either on the small screen or I'm on the medium screen, or in a lecture theater, it's the big screen. So there's just so much screen time involved. There's an implication when that comes in terms of what instant gratification means. And our younger cohorts of undergraduate students come from an era where instant gratification, you immediately get a like on a photo, you immediately can check out, and Take a Lot can deliver your package within 6 hours. Like, the gratification is immediate. And that is too transient when it comes to what a learning experience looks like. So I try to circumvent that in certain small, meaningful ways. As a tiny example, it sounds silly. I think it works. I ask students to put their phones on their tables. I want to see them. And the first 2-3 lectures, I actually walk around the lecture to see if at least the majority of students would just turn their phones upside down. And then I put a timer on my phone, and about 24-25 minutes into a lecture, my timer goes off and they know, okay, now they have what I call a WhatsApp minute or an Instagram minute. You check your phone and then try and keep the approximately what I also tell them. You must be able to concentrate with me at the very least for the length of a Friends episode. So that's about 23-24
They don't know what a Friends episode is.
I know
I
had to dig into some of the current common Netflix type of things.
I know this because I made some Friends references in a class once, and they just stared at me and thought I was stupid.
So, but yeah, Friends or equivalent, you must be able to.
Just joking.
I know. you must be able to, be on this journey in class with me for at least 24 minutes or around there. And I'll give you a minute to scratch the social media itch. And I just made peace with the fact that I have to plan that, because at the end of the day, if it's 2 or 3 minutes per lecture, and I have, let's say, 48 odd lectures over the course of a semester, that technically means like I'm almost giving them 2 whole lectures worth of social media time. But I've made peace with that, because at the very least, I feel like if you make it into bite-sized chunks, at least 24 minutes now, and then we'll have another 24 minutes, or whatever way, numbers not important here, then the engagement changes, because it's too easy, so that as soon as your mind taps out of whatever Johan is saying in front of the class, I will grab my phone, and then you're lost. You lost them for the rest of that 50 minutes.
Or for the rest of the week's lectures, maybe.
Absolutely. So managing the engagement in such a way to invite them to participate, at the very least, just intellectually, makes a big difference.
I do something similar. I don't give them screen time, but I do this once or 2 times in a lecture, where I basically tell them to turn to a neighbor and, in their own words, just basically, in layman terms, explain the topic of the last 20 minutes. Because I tell them there's so many things that write for them. They have so little opportunity to give stuff in their own words, their own opinion, that they don't really prepare for those types of questions and assessments. So even with doing those little intersects in a class where and explain in your own words what is, I don't know, a certain topic. At least they have some opportunity to go, because cognitively that something happens, right, when you have to explain to someone, and even more if it's in your own words. But teaching, it's rapidly evolving. I think I feel I'm always behind in terms of what's the best way, but at least trying. So maybe just very quickly, is there something that you are thinking about that you might start doing, or how has, especially in this last LLM years, how have your teaching style changed or evolved, especially this last 3 years?
What I've done in some of my courses is I've given students a very specific prompts to say, okay, if you want to know more about this, use this prompt. If you are going to use something like an LLM. And I've tried to phrase the prompts in such a way that it minimizes any hallucination. Because ChatGPT has basically currently become a form of what we grew up with as our Google. You go to ChatGPT before you go to Google, and then even if you go to Google, you get a ChatGPT style answer.
Yes, that AI tool, right?
So I think that has made a difference in terms of trying to minimize the hallucinogenic nature that LLMs can often give. Most of the, when you get incorrect answers is often because of poorly phrased prompts, poorly understood prompts. So I just thought, well, okay, let's just dive into this now. I'm going to give you, this is a reasonably good prompt to use. And if you want to change your interest, okay, but really what is the jump from geometric to negative binomial? I just need to understand some of the context. Then I try to give them context of how to approach that type of answer, what to look out for, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 key things that's involved here. After we've already discussed this in class, but repetition is much more useful than no repetition, at least in an undergraduate context. And then trying to debug it by yourself before you just keep on making the prompt worse and worse and worse. So being able to have debugging questions, I think, is super useful.
Yeah.
But then the one other thing that I've tried to address, whether it is that successful, I can probably quantify it by more in-depth investigation in some way or another, but is to get them to read more beyond the syllabus. there's a couple of really cool blog posts that's around the internet. And I try to hook these onto a form of meaningful content that we do in class. It's usually not extremely theoretical or technical type of blog posts. There's a really interesting thing that was published, I think, in it's an editorial in the Journal of International Finance or something of the like, about where they just briefly reflect on what a normal assumption really means in a time series context for white noise. And so since I teach a time series course, I make that optional reading. And the amount of feedback and engagement that I've had after that, because then every single time that I say, okay, this is an AR1, this is an AR2, this is a forecast, this is ARIMA in the R, for blah, 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 blah. And then so many times then I say, and we assume that epsilon has some kind of a white noise process. We're going to assume it's Gaussian. And then immediately something flips in terms of, but I actually saw something that it might not always be Gaussian. It might not actually be normal, because we're just chasing this dream. And I tell them this, we chase this dream of, some kind of independent set of residuals that's centered somewhat symmetrically clockwise bell curve around 0. We often choose something like normality. Sometimes that's not quite what we end up getting. And how we need to then reflect on, if it's not normal, then what other options are there? Or do we just stop thinking? So immediately, by supplementing some of the content with other written work that's usually 1 or 2 pages long, I'm not going to give them a 30-page academic paper to work through in depth. But that made a big difference, because overarching, what I'm actually getting to is my experience is just that the undergraduate students, more often than not, do not read enough. And by reading, I don't mean they read my notes or my slides. I mean reading a book, reading literally whatever you fancy. And
yeah, I mean, it's part of learning. My learning recommendation in my module frameworks is like, the more different types of mediums you engage with, the better the outcome you will have for the module. So obviously engaging with the notes, watching videos, reading other stuff. I definitely agree with you on that. But it definitely sounds like you are definitely in the camp of, you are not fighting this, you are going with this. I mean, even with reading, even if students end up giving an article to chat and tell me what is the best insights from this. I know it's not the first prize, but at least they're engaging with other materials, and there's some reading involved, because I agree. I am a reader, but I think I read less these last couple of years. It's just how things changed for us.
But you used to be a reader.
Yes,
or at some point, me too. I used to read a lot more than I do now. And that has greatly shaped, I think, how I think and how I consume knowledge now. So it's more of a compound interest situation of what I've done in the past is really capitalizing now and trying to instigate at least a sense of reading more than you would have otherwise outside of the course material, but hopefully in a meaningful way tied to your course material.
Yeah, no, the power of reading, very important. I love this thing. So a very common practice in the Netherlands, where I studied for a while, they have these outside libraries. I'm not sure if you've seen it somewhere in the world, but it's quite common in Europe, or some places of Europe, where people would have a case outside the house that's accessible from the street. And people, it's like the house library and the books are freely available. So you can take a book, you can put a book back in, and people, it's this reading culture that they have. I'm not sure if it's really used by younger people, but at least it's visible, right? It gives this notion that we should care about reading more.
There are 2 or 3 of those type of situations in Pretoria, actually.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Well, I haven't seen it in the Western Cape. So maybe it's because we are stuck in our cars.
Maybe you can be the first.
I can, yes, in my community. Johan, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this talk. Very thoughtful, very food for thought, stuff that I will definitely think about later. Maybe just to end off with, and this is usually another question where I usually end up with these conversations, is if someone is thinking about statistics, data science, what is that thing that they need to have, or what are the most important skills you think someone should have to go into this? Because obviously it's not just a skill set of, can I do an ANOVA, can I do a regression, but you need to have some sort of, you need to be set up in a certain way, maybe. Do you have a view of that? Or I think we touched about it in the beginning of the interview, but maybe just to formally end or close our talk.
The first thing that comes to mind is that you should not be afraid to be wrong. As a young student. Remember that immediate gratification is a social media dream. We are often wrong. We are only human. And if you are thinking about venturing into a statistics or data science world, is that you might not be wrong, but somebody else might be different and they might also not be wrong. There are many views and many approaches, and we can try to fit a model to data until we are blue in the face by doing a ton of stuff to the data. But that does not necessarily make you wrong. It does not also necessarily make the other person wrong. There's an incredible wealth of diverse views and thoughts and frameworks, and that should be more liberating than it should be a defeatist type of approach or experience. So you might not be wrong, but somebody else might be different. They might also not be wrong. And you have to embrace that in a meaningful way. And if you feel like you have space in your mind and in your heart to work in an environment like that, then this could be an environment that you can flourish in.
Fantastic. I love that. Thank you very much. Okay, Johan. So thank you very much for being part of this range. SASA is really excited about this, and we're so glad that you're now part of this movement, or this thing that we're trying to do.
I appreciate the invitation. Thank you for your kind answers and banter and the conversation, and hopefully I will see you soon.
Cool. Right. Ons hoef nie een keer te gepause het nie. Jy is 'n natural.
Jom, dit is die redenaars op skool.